The Greatest Crime in American History, parts 1 through 5. I'd like to walk through this with you, if you don't mind, because you've really done the research. Where does the 2016 election crime begin?
Well, I just would like to draw people's attention to a quote from President Carter, who said, "I think a full investigation would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf." That was from President Carter on June 28th of 2019.
You know, he said that on this program, too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, that's incredible. So for me, it begins in 2011 when Hillary Clinton demanded or asked for an international investigation into Putin's election in 2011, which she felt was fraudulent. And then in 2014, Putin sent spies to America to figure out where our vulnerabilities were, where our weaknesses, particularly in what they learned were purple states, our racial issues, our divisions, our misogyny, and thus began the full court press exploitation of our weaknesses and divisions by the troll operation, and I hate calling it that, as you know, the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, run by Wagner Group's Prigozhin, who was alive at that time. In any case, so for me, it begins there. It begins with this online influence campaign blanketing all of social media, where people in St. Petersburg pretended to be Americans and divide us up. Meanwhile, you have people in America who are doing the same thing. So it begins in my book with me looking at the same organized crime ring that is about to take power in our country and do a decapitation strike was involved in promoting the same type of Russian narratives that were made to look like American patriots online, particularly at Twitter. And when I saw people like Trump and Musk and Dinesh D'Souza whinging about this guy, Douglas Mackey, who was charged by our Justice Department for interfering with our elections on Twitter by pretending people could vote from home and targeting Hillary supporters, that guy, Douglas Mackey, received a 7-month sentence, but you had this cabal that's about to take power in our country complaining about that and saying, oh, he was just a shit poster. That was not the case.
Yeah,
he was prosecuted.
Forgive the interruption, but we're on live broadcast stations and we can't use language like that. So apologies to anybody who may be offended, but keep going. I understand.
I apologize. I was using a word that is a colloquial. Okay, I apologize for that, Tom. Thank you for letting me know. Bottom line is that they were this gang was trying to minimize the impacts of what was happening on social media. And as you know, this same crew always says, oh, you can't have any censorship. But we have learned more recently from our Justice Department that covert influence activities are not journalism. So you had this group, particularly on Twitter, pushing out the same narratives that were coming from the St. Petersburg troll operation. And I felt it was incredibly important to look at that. So I did a 5-part series which focused on the part 1 is about the digital guerrilla, the case I was just talking about with Douglas Mackey, who became this Russian propaganda super spreader. The second was the Translator project, which showed exactly what was happening in St. Petersburg, and it relates to our muted response to the election today because, for example, the Women's March erupted in 2016, this global movement of women who came out and said something terrible just happened in America. But meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, teams of trolls were working around the clock for the next 18 months to destroy that movement by pretending to be Americans who were complaining about this, that, and the other thing and trying to divide people. And it was effective because it kneecapped the operation. And to bring this to the present, what we just learned from Romania is when hybrid warfare is being waged, you can actually nullify an election, which is what just happened in Romania. The next part was about how, I show Roger Stone's involvement in this. I show Paul Manafort's involvement. And the bottom line is that if we don't look at recent history, we're never going to be able to come out from under what just happened to us. Like I said at the beginning, a decapitation strike by American billionaires who are part of what I believe is an organized crime ring to stay out of prison. Other countries are doing a much better job and setting a much better example of what we could do to stop this.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the Romanian situation is really quite remarkable. I mean, it's, in fact, if you could describe that in a little more detail, I'd appreciate it for our listeners.
Sure. Well, the bottom line is they just looked around and saw what just happened in our election. How did we just get this right-winger who was on TikTok elected? And they looked and saw, and again, some of the same characters we've seen before. I've been seeing Brad Parscale's name thrown around in this. They said our country was being attacked by hybrid warfare, which is, it should have never been called warfare, which is war. It is a way to, basically mess with people's minds and take them away from reality. And so they nullified the first round of their presidential elections. They said, we've been targeted by Russia. They targeted us through social media. So they've actually nullified the first round.
Right, which is incredible. I mean, it's that a country would just, come right out and say, Russia just tried to interfere in our elections, and we're going to say the Russian candidate was the guy who had won in that first round. Sadly, we've done nothing like that here in the United States. If you can stick around for another 15 minutes or so, I'd like to continue walking through your book. Is that all right with you?
That'd be great, Tom.
Okay,
thank you.
So you've laid out, starting in St. Petersburg, going all the way back to shortly after 2011. Now we're to part two. What's the second part of your book?
Well, so just in opening with, I just want to go back to the 2016 is the pivotal moment that most Americans who pay attention to information warfare will remember. Twitter was an absolute crime scene. You had people like Roger Stone, a close Trump ally, retweeting the same stuff that Douglas Mackey tweeted about election interference, using memes that encourage Hillary supporters to vote by text from home. That's not a thing. And thousands of people did that. And so for me, it's like, even if you had, one vote change, shouldn't that be something that is investigated? And shouldn't somebody like Roger Stone be held to account for that? And the overarching thing that continually comes through my work and comes out in this book is we have a terrible, terrible time in America at dealing with actual treason, at dealing with actual traitors. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that, because some of what we need to do now is actually deal with that pretty quickly. Because again, same people, same billionaires involved, paying people to interfere with our election. And, so I opened with the crime scene of Twitter and how difficult it was to actually piece together
so let me pause you there if I can.
Yes.
Because we're going to hit a break here. We'll be back in just a moment. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Heidi Siegmund Cuda is with us. Betty Dangerous, BETTE dangerous.com is her website.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And it's where you can find her 2016 election attacks series, The Greatest Crime in American History. It's available there also as an ebook. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Heidi. So, Heidi, keep going.
Again, I apologize for using a bad word. I feel terrible.
Oh, that's quite all right.
I didn't know that was still a bad word.
Yeah.
So listen, one of the things I think it's really important to do is look at what was happening. Again, the attack. So about the second or third part of this book focuses on what we know from what was happening in Russia from the actual employees who were doing this work to attack America. And keep in mind, part of their job was to mess with Ukrainians' understanding of reality as well as the Russian people's understanding of reality. But I focus on what was called the Translator Project, and we know that's what it was called because multiple Russians were indicted for this. And one of the women who worked on this project said it felt like half the country was trolls. And that really struck me because I think that, again, because we do not address information warfare in any meaningful way in America, I think people will be surprised at how many people are more than willing to take money to do this feeding of unreality.
Sure.
But she says something, this particular person who worked on the operation says something that I would love your readers to understand. Public, it is harmful because we are being brainwashed. The trolls themselves are being brainwashed. We won't be able to understand what is really happening. We are put against one another and are sliding back into the old ways when we were searching for the enemy among us, our friends, our colleagues, that feeling from the Soviet times. That really struck me because there's the escalation of paranoia that they are pushing into the news sphere and into people's, minds, while they too are also being affected by it. And there's a moment where one of the trolls was sitting there taking in information on what his duties were, and he realized that he no longer cared about truth. He just didn't care. So this assault on reality is the most important thing, I think, that America still has not addressed in any meaningful way. And I continue to show how, for example, here's a tweet from Donald Trump. It shows that he actually uses the exact same wording as the propagandists coming out of St. Petersburg. So once again, I go back to Jimmy Carter. I think a full investigation would show that in 2016, Trump was aided into office by the Russians. And I think it's safe to say when you have Paul Manafort as his, pro bono campaign manager, and Paul Manafort had just done the same job 10 years ago in Ukraine, getting paid tens of millions of dollars to reinvent Viktor Yanukovych to become sort of the gangster in Ukraine and take over the presidency. Like, where are our intelligence agents? We've done all these limited hangouts, a little bit of prison time here or there, but we're talking about our inability to deal with what I believe is actual treason, and that is all throughout the book. We show Roger Stone's role. I'm sure your viewers know Roger Stone has been a malignancy on democracy for many years, going back to, the Nixon tattoo on his back and the 2000 Brooks Brothers riots.
Oh, and he used to sign memos with the SS logo. The Nazi SS. It's insane.
There's
Betty,
nothing cute.
Excuse me, Heidi. We're talking to Heidi Siegmund Cuda. BettyDangerous.com is the website. Heidi, we'll be back on the other side in 60 seconds. Please stay with us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. It's 19 minutes past the Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3120. It'll get you right through to them. Between 1920 and 1980, America went from the middle class being about 10 or 12% over 60% of us. What drove that was high taxation. The high tax rates, Woodrow Wilson had 91% income tax rate. Franklin Roosevelt, 90% top income tax rate. Lyndon Johnson dropped it down to 74%. But from that, throughout that entire period of time, with the exception of the Roaring 20s, this is a brief little 10-year period, 12-year period, the top income tax rate was in the neighborhood of 74 to 90%. And what that did was it caused really rich people to leave their money in their businesses and pay their workers well, and that produced the middle class. Reagan came along and dropped that top tax rate down to 25% and then 27%, and it's now in the 30s. And that's what killed the middle class. We need to bring back these high taxes. There's a whole lot article about it at hartmannreport.com. Whichever, go back to being good citizens. Check it out.
Every time I vote, I get so mad. The billionaires are laughing, it's so sad. They bought the laws, they bought the game, and now they're selling us all shame. All up for Christmas is my democracy, back in my democracy.
Yeah, we would all like our billionaires. Welcome back. Betty Dangerous is the website, BETTE Dangerous.com. Heidi Siegmund Cuda is Betty Dangerous and is sharing with us the story, this ebook, and it's also online over at BettyDangerous.com, the election attack series, What Happened in 2016. So Heidi, just a moment ago, and we've got about 4 minutes left here before we're going to hit a break.
Yeah.
Just a moment ago, you were talking about Paul Manafort. He was paid, well, I think it was $14 million by a Putin-affiliated oligarch to install a Putin-friendly president, Yanukovych, in Ukraine. He comes over to the United States and says, "I'll work for you for free," and he runs Trump's campaign. Is feeding information to Russian intelligence from, the secret internal polling from the Republicans about which states and which counties and even maybe which individuals need to be targeted on Facebook. Continue the story.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's so great to speak with somebody who understands the gravity of the situation. Paul Manafort, it was a great cardinal. Paul Manafort got Yanukovych reinstalled, and what happened then? He refused to sign a letter saying that, he would be moving Ukraine toward the EU. And what happened then? Young people said, we need this. We need to be able to get visas. Then we had the revolution of dignity, where old and young joined in. And guess what happened to Viktor? He was forced to flee to Moscow with 40 of his other criminal friends. And I bring this up because right now in America, we're searching for what to do. What do we do? Well, I think it's going to take something like young and old getting together and, starting to protest against this, because this is not normal what's happened in America. And I was going to lead you to one part of my book where I go through a timeline. We literally have Trump in Helsinki in 2018 saying, he doesn't see that Russia interfered. 3 days earlier, we have our, law enforcement agencies charging the Russians for interfering. A few days after that, we have Roger Stone saying he's in touch with the GRU. This was, he was in touch with an account, this Guccifer account, basically that we now know, is related to the we have all these signs. I'm just looking at this timeline going, we have all of this activity. It's all laid out. If I can figure it out, then our intelligence agencies know this is happening. So why the limited hangouts? We must get better at prosecuting traitors and foreign agents working with foreign enemies who are literally at this moment trying to overthrow the United States of America. And what I really wanted to make sure I shared with your viewers, I think right now we need a leader and not a bureaucrat. There are so many things that Joe Biden could do today to stop what I believe is this fascist train, and we need to do this.
Give us a quick list.
Well, I mean, one of them is let's billionaires working for foreign agents and foreign enemies need to be arrested. Okay, if you took money from the Saudis and the Russians and used a social media platform to actually push an election towards your candidate for fear of going to prison, which Elon Musk said in his own words, arrest him. Let's detain him. Let's do what we used to do with traitors. We used to strip them of citizenship. We used to deport them. We used to incarcerate them. What we need to be protected from these billionaires, because they're literally trying to decapitate our democracy. We have to stop with this muted response in America. We are in a terrible crisis. Old and young need to get together. MAGA needs to join us. Nobody wants what's coming. And right now we have the opportunity to protest because Joe Biden is still our president. So I think we need to actually deal with foreign enemy agents. We need to still remember that we are at this moment a country of laws, and Biden has to use his power. He could flood the Supreme Court. We have criminals on our Supreme Court who took what anybody else would call as bribes in any other business. Yeah, and I believe that even MAGA is starting to come out of its stupor when they see that all these things are about to be taken away from us. So at the very least, investigate some bomb threats. Let's take a look at that. We had bomb threats during our election. Let's take a look at that. I mean, there's